And DFD Delight Think Healed, we dive in, hit that. It only gets messier from here. Family, grief, greed, and one Thanksgiving turkey that started it all. They say grief brings people together. Whoever they are, they've clearly never hosted a Thanksgiving the week after burying their husband of 41 years. There I was, standing in my kitchen in Madison, Wisconsin, brushing melted butter on a 15-pound turkey like it was a damn spa treatment, while my adult children lounged in the living room like they were waiting for the reading of the will. Not dinner, not family time, the will. "Mom, do you know if Dad had any stocks left in the Fidelity account?" My son Greg called out casually, like he was asking about the weather. "No idea," I replied, smiling tightly while stuffing rosemary into the bird's hollow chest cavity, "but I'm sure you'll find out soon enough." That turkey wasn't the only thing getting roasted in my house that day. Greg and my daughter Jessica had arrived 3 days earlier, not to check on me, not to cry with me, not to hold my hand in the quiet, awful evenings when I couldn't breathe without Harold. No, they came with spreadsheets, laptops, legal pads. You'd think we were planning a corporate merger, not burying their father. Jessica barely looked up from her phone. "I'm just saying it would be good to know. We're trying to plan things responsibly." Oh, how noble of her, planning responsibly, with my husband's death as the business model. I had spent 4 decades raising them, feeding them, bandaging their scraped knees and mending their broken hearts, and now they looked at me like I was an inconvenient extension of the estate. The human delay before the payout. I kept basting. Harold hadn't even been cold in the ground for a week, and here I was, hosting Thanksgiving because Jessica insisted we keep up appearances. She brought her husband too, a CPA with the warmth of a parking meter, who gave me a spreadsheet and a smug nod instead of condolences, but I bit my tongue and basted the bird, because I still had something they didn't know. You see, the day before Harold died, when he was too weak to hold my hand but still strong enough to whisper with that clarity the dying sometimes get, he asked me to change something, and I did. I followed his last wish. I followed it to the letter, but I wasn't about to tell them that. Not yet. Back in the living room, Jessica was pretending to be helpful. "Do you need me to do anything with the sides, Mum, or did you already overcook them?" she added with a smirk. "I'm sorry, dear," I said sweetly. I forgot sarcasm was a love language. She didn't laugh. I did. Quietly. We sat down to dinner like actors on a stage, each playing our part. Me, the grieving widow. Greg, the eager heir. Jessica, the efficiency expert. And the turkey. Golden, fragrant, and the only damn thing in that house that wasn't fake. We carved. We passed plates. We toasted Harold. And the whole time I could feel their eyes flicking toward the mahogany cabinet where I kept the documents. The will, the one they were so sure would confirm what they believed, that everything would pass neatly into their waiting hands. I let them believe it. For now. Later that night, when they thought I'd gone to bed, I heard them in the den. "She's not going to last long," Greg whispered. "You saw how shaky she was with the carving knife." "She's lost," Jessica agreed. "We just have to be patient." Patient. Lot like vultures circling a still-breathing carcass, they were patient. Well, guess what? This old bird still had fight left in her. And Harold's last wish? Oh, that was the match waiting to hit the gasoline. What happened next flipped everything upside down. You do not want to miss how this story twists. Trust me, it's just getting started. The morning after Thanksgiving, I made coffee, strong, black, no cream, no sugar, just like Harold used to like it. Only now, he wasn't there to drink it. And the kitchen, once loud with bickering and burnt toast, felt hollow. Except for the voices in the den. Jessica was on her phone, probably with a lawyer. I knew the tone, that fake whispered politeness people use when they're talking about someone still alive, but inconveniently in the room. Greg had the nerve to ask me, over pancakes, if I'd thought about downsizing. "Oh, you mean the house your father built with his bare hands?" I asked, chewing slowly. "The one we poured 41 years of sweat and love into." "Yeah, well, the market's hot," he mumbled, sipping orange juice like it was liquid courage. "It's a lot to manage on your own. Maybe we could help with the logistics." "Help?" I repeated. How thoughtful. Should I start packing now, or will you handle it while I'm out grocery shopping? He didn't answer, because he knew I knew. They didn't want to help. They wanted to clear me out, make the house quiet, clean, and convenient. For sale signs and open houses. I wanted to scream, but instead, I smiled. You know what? I said, placing my coffee cup down with a gentle clink. I think I'm going to take a drive, get some air. Are you okay to drive? Jessica asked, raising one Botoxed brow like she was already picking out my nursing home wallpaper. I'm 62, not 102, but thanks for the concern. I didn't take a drive, I made a call, to David. He answered on the first ring. Linda, he said, his voice still warm, still familiar. You okay? I hadn't heard that voice in nearly 20 years. Not since Harold and I decided to sponsor that program for underprivileged teens. David had been 15, living in a foster home with more locks than love. We mentored him, tutored him, fed him. He used to mow our lawn and then stay for dinner just to hear what normal sounded like. You might want to come by the house, I told him. There's something you should see. When I pulled back into the driveway, Jessica was standing in the yard, talking to her husband. She gave me that brittle smile people give old women they're about to bury under legal paperwork. Everything okay, Mum? Oh, everything's fabulous, sweetheart. Just tying up loose ends. That afternoon, I dusted off the envelope. Thick, sealed, official. Greg saw it first, his eyes locked on it like a heat-seeking missile. What's that? He asked too quickly. Something your father and I worked on, I said. He moved toward it like he was about to reach for it, but I stopped him with a look. The kind mother's master from birth. You'll find out soon enough. The doorbell rang. Right on time. Jessica opened the door and stared, blinking. Can I help you? She asked. David stepped inside, nodding at me. Hi, Linda. Jessica turned to me. Mum, who is this? I stood up. This is David. You might want to remember his face. Greg looked confused. Jessica looked suspicious. Her husband looked bored. David smiled, kind but firm. Nice to meet you both. I was invited. Jessica folded her arms. Invited by who? By the woman who owns this house. Boom. They didn't know it yet, but the fuse had been lit. To be continued. You think this was tense? Oh, honey, you haven't seen anything yet. The real bomb is about to drop. Stay tuned to find out what happened when I opened the envelope. When Harold and I wrote that will, we did it at the kitchen table over meatloaf and Merlot. He held my hand and said, I don't want you to end up alone, or controlled, or used. Too late, I joked, and we laughed, like real partners. We'd seen too much to be sentimental, but Harold knew about the kids, about the coldness, about how quick they'd circle the carcass when he was gone. So we wrote the truth into that will. And now it was sitting on my dining table, right next to Jessica's handbag and Greg's entitled stare. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, grey suit, grey voice, cleared his throat. If everyone's ready, he said, glancing at the vultures. Greg adjusted his cufflinks like he was about to accept an award. Jessica smiled tightly, the kind of smile that says, hurry up, I've got a brunch reservation. David sat beside me, quiet, respectful, still unsure why I'd dragged him into this suburban circus. Let's begin, Henderson said. It started like any other will. To my beloved wife Linda, I leave the house in full. Jessica frowned. Wait, just the house? Henderson continued unbothered. To my son Greg and daughter Jessica, I leave the remaining 50% of my estate, including investments, life insurance and business assets, is to go to David McLean. In recognition of the loyalty, integrity and love he has shown this family when others could not. Silence. No one breathed. David blinked. I don't. Jessica stood. Is this a joke? Greg's voice dropped an octave. That's gotta be a mistake. I sipped my tea. No mistake. You gave our money to this guy? Jessica hissed, pointing at David like he was a scam artist selling Bibles from the trunk of a van. Your father did, I corrected. While he was lucid. While he still believed in things like honor and decency. Greg's voice was tight, venomous. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, he trusted the one person who never treated him like a retirement plan. Jessica's jaw tightened. He wasn't family. And what exactly were you, Jessica? Because I don't remember you changing his IV, or reading to him when he forgot his own name. I don't recall you skipping your vacation in Cabo when he got pneumonia. Mom, you're being emotional, Greg snapped. This is unfair, we're his children. No, I said, eyes locked on his. You were his heirs, until you made it clear you were just here collect. David was still frozen. I never asked for this, he whispered. I know, I said. That's why you deserved it. Jessica turned to Henderson. We'll contest it. Greg nodded. Yeah, this isn't final. Henderson sighed. The will was updated with video confirmation and medical approval. You can try to challenge it, but based on precedent, Jessica snapped. We'll see you in court. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. Greg stayed back. You think this is over, Mum? You think we'll just let this happen? I stood up, walked to him, and looked my son in the eye. You let a lot happen, Greg. You let your father die thinking he'd failed as a parent. You let your greed speak louder than your grief. You let this family rot from the inside out. He said nothing, just stared at me like I was some relic from a past he'd rather forget. Then he left. David looked at me. Linda, are you sure? Yes, I said, I'm sure. I walked to the window and watched my children drive away. They didn't look back. We're on the edge now. What happens next is not just emotional, it's explosive. Family doesn't end with blood, and betrayal doesn't go unanswered. Don't miss part 2 of this chapter. It's where I take my life back. Chapter 3, part 2. I didn't cry. Not after they stormed out. Not after Greg's threat. Not after David sat there looking like he'd seen the ghost of every Thanksgiving turkey past. I'd cried enough over those two. But that night, I sat in Harold's old armchair, still smelled like his aftershave and peppermint, and tried to breathe in peace. And that's when the phone rang. Blocked number. I answered because I'm a fool. Still believed maybe one of them had come to their senses. Linda, Jessica's voice, sharp, cold. You embarrassed us. Oh, honey, I said. You embarrass yourselves just fine. You humiliated us in front of that outsider. You mean David, the man who helped your father bathe while you were busy updating your Instagram? She didn't laugh, didn't even pretend. You've betrayed your own children, she said. For what? Some man you barely knew 5 years? 5 years. That man carried Harold's dying weight and still thanked me for the privilege. I clenched my teeth. I've been your mother for over 35 years, Jessica. Tell me, when did you stop acting like a daughter? Click. She hung up. David came by the next morning, brought me coffee, just like Harold used to, strong, black, judgmental. I didn't mean to cause all this, he said. You didn't, I told him. They did. We sat on the porch, watching the birds, silent for a bit. Do you regret it? He finally asked. I turned to him. Letting you into my life? No, he said. Letting them out of it. And Lord, that hit me like a punch to the ribs. Because the truth was, it hurt, like hell. Letting go of the dream of a decent family, but I'd spent decades clinging to what should be while ignoring what was. Later that week, the letters started arriving, from Greg's lawyer, then Jessica's, formal, cold, ugly, words like undue influence, manipulation, mental decline. They were accusing me, of being mentally unfit when Harold wrote the will. As if I'd somehow tricked him from the hospice bed with a sponge bath and a turkey sandwich. I brought the letters to Henderson. He looked them over, sighed and said, It's posturing, standard scare tactic. but the damage was done. Not legally, emotionally. My children were preparing for war. Not over love, not over truth, over cash. The worst came that Sunday. I'd gone to church, needing some peace, just a little grace. And that's when I saw them, Greg and Jessica, standing near the pastor, all pious and fake smiling. I froze. Jessica spotted me first. Didn't flinch, just gave me this look, like I was dog shit on her Sunday heels. Pastor Charles approached. "Linda, we were just praying for you." "Really?" I said. Must have been the part where they asked for forgiveness for greed and arrogance. Jessica stepped in. "We're not doing this here." "Why not? You've already decided I'm the villain in your Lifetime movie." Greg said, "You made that choice when you gave away our inheritance." That word again. Ours. I stared at them. These children I once swaddled in flannel and kissed goodnight. They said nothing. I walked out. Didn't even stay for the benediction. That night, I opened the old photo albums, the ones I'd been too scared to look at. Birthdays, graduations, Greg in that ridiculous bow tie, Jessica missing her front teeth, memories. But memories aren't love. Love is a verb. It's action. And they'd stopped acting like family a long time ago. I made one more phone call, to the newspaper, to the blog, to the woman I met at the grief support group who wrote columns about elder neglect. It was time to tell the story, not the fairy tale, the truth. We are one breath away from the explosion. Everything's on the table. Truth, pain, and a public reckoning. Chapter 4 is where the world hears what really happened. Don't even blink. This next part is a storm. Chapter 4. You'd think going public with your story would feel liberating, like tossing a brick through a window and finally letting fresh air in. But the truth, it's messier than that. It's louder, uglier, and a hell of a lot lonelier. The blog post went up on a Thursday, a quiet, grey-skied morning. I remember because I'd just fed the birds and burned my hand on the kettle. Widow writes her late husband out of his children's inheritance, but read why. It went viral in 12 hours. Thousands of comments, some full of support, some calling me a monster. One charming man from Texas told me to rot in the nursing home, alone. Nice. But for every troll, there was a message like, "You are so brave. My kids did the same to my. Thank you for speaking what so many of us feel." I sat in Harold's chair, phone buzzing in my hand like it was alive. And I thought, well, you poked the damn beehive, might as well take the honey. By Friday, I'd been invited onto a local radio show. They wanted the real story behind the viral widow. David drove me there. I wore Harold's old jacket, big on me but warm, and red lipstick I hadn't touched in years. Live mic, lights. A host with a voice smoother than buttered bourbon. "So, Linda," he said, "you wrote a will that excluded your own children. Why?" And just like that, I told the world. Because love isn't automatic, and neither is loyalty. You don't earn an inheritance by existing. You earn it by showing up. My husband understood that, even as he was dying. My children didn't. There was a pause, a long one. Then the calls started. One woman sobbing on the line. "My daughter hasn't called me in 2 years, and she still expects to get my house." A man in Georgia. "You're right, I put my stepdaughter through college. My son thinks that makes me a traitor." Caller after caller, broken voices. Same story, over and over. People who gave too much and got spit on for it. By the time I got home, my front porch looked like a damn florist. Flowers, letters, boxes of chocolates. Someone even sent a turkey. I laughed so hard I almost choked on a breath mint, but not everyone was sending gifts. That night, Greg showed up. No warning, just headlights in the driveway and a knock like a cop at my door. I opened it. He stood there, red-eyed, pale, fists clenched like a schoolboy caught cheating. "You went to the media," he said. "No," I said, "the media came to me. You made us look like monsters. You made yourselves look like monsters. I just gave context." He stepped inside without asking, looked around like he didn't recognize the place, like it wasn't the home he grew up in. Or maybe he just couldn't handle the fact that it still felt like home, even without him. "I was grieving," he said. "I didn't know how to show it." I stared at him. "So you showed it by suing your mother?" Silence. He dropped into a chair, the same chair Harold had died in. I miss him, Greg whispered, but I didn't know how to compete with David. He was always there. I wasn't. That struck something deep. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Greg, I said quietly, you didn't have to compete. You just had to call, to visit, to care. He wiped his eyes, sniffled. Jessica, she won't talk to me. She says I betrayed her by not fighting harder. Well, I muttered, hell hath no fury like a greedy daughter scorned. He huffed a laugh through his nose. Then he said it. I want to drop the lawsuit. My mouth actually went dry. I don't care about the money anymore, he continued, but I want to come back, to family, to something real. We sat for hours. No grand reconciliations, no Hallmark music, just hard truth, strong coffee, and silence thick enough to cut with a butter knife. It wasn't a happy ending. Not yet, but it was a beginning. One decision, one will, one last act that defines everything. Stay with me. You'll want to see what the hell I did next. This is the part where everything finally breaks, or heals. The lawyer's office smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, the kind of place where lives quietly fall apart between filing cabinets and dusty blinds. David sat beside me, calm as ever, while I fidgeted with the clasp of my purse like it held a grenade. Across from us, Greg. No lawyer, no Jessica, just him, still pale but not angry, just hollow. You sure you want to be here? I asked. He nodded. I want to know what he chose. I need to. Fair enough. Mr. Langston, Harold's lawyer since Nixon was in office, cleared his throat. I've reviewed the final version of the will, signed and notarized shortly before Mr. Whitmore's passing. There is one change of interest. You could have heard my heartbeat through the wall. Harold had asked me not to read the final version, said it would be his last word, and I had respected that. But now it was here. Langston flipped the page.
Greg? He stared at Langston like someone had slapped him with a Bible.
Who? He croaked. Langston adjusted his glasses. David Allen Myers, caretaker, legal guardian for Mr. Whitmore's final year. I know who he is, Greg snapped, but why? I didn't answer, not because I didn't have one, but because it wasn't mine to give. David stood slowly, looked Greg straight in the eye. Because I was there when he fell, because I held his hand through chemo, because he asked me to read him the newspaper when he was too tired to keep his eyes open. Greg's jaw twitched. I didn't want a dime, David continued, but he insisted. He said, I've got 3 kids, and only one of them knows how to ask me how I'm doing without checking the clock. That's all. The lawyer excused himself quietly, sensing what came next wasn't for legal ears. I sat back and waited. Greg paced, then laughed, a single, sharp, bitter laugh. He gave it all to the hired help. No, I said calm. He gave it to the man who stayed, the one who loved him without agenda. He stared at me. He loved you, Greg, I added, but you didn't show up, not when it counted. He looked down, voice low. You could have changed it, you had power of attorney. I did, I nodded, but I didn't want to, because for the first time in his damn life, Harold made a decision entirely based on what he felt. Not guilt, not duty, just truth. 2 weeks later, the world had moved on. The blog post kept spreading, mothers, widows, and caretakers all over the country, sending emails that made me cry over my morning coffee. David used the money to open a small community care home, not flashy, but warm, filled with real people, real stories. He named it Harold's Porch. And me? I started volunteering there twice a week, wiping spills, reading out loud, planting hydrangeas that never bloomed quite right. And I didn't give a damn. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for what I was owed. I was living for what felt true. Greg? He comes by once a month, mows the lawn, brings donuts, always the wrong kind. We don't talk much about the past, but sometimes, when he looks at David and says, "Thanks, man," I catch a glimpse of the boy I raised. Jessica hasn't reached out. I'm not holding my breath. So, there it is. One name on a will, one truth, carved into stone. Harold didn't choose money. He didn't choose tradition. He didn't choose blood. He chose presence. He chose love. And for the first time in my whole damn life, I did too. If this story hit you in the gut, you're not alone. Hit subscribe because there are more truths where that came from. Real life doesn't tie itself in a bow, but it damn sure deserves to be told.